I'm talking about Jennette McCurdy's memoir that came around sometime this summer called I'm Glad My Mother Died. And this title is so controversial, I don't think I'm even going to put it in my bio because a lot of people might be misled by the title. Jennette McCurdy, if you don't know her, and I didn't know who she was because I am a true Disney fan. I grew up watching the Disney Channel, Miley Cyrus, Lizzie McGuire. I never really watched anything in Nickelodeon, but she was one of the most famous child stars who acted along Ariana Grande, and she was in like iCarly, so she's quite popular among people my age who grew up watching Nickelodeon. But as I said, I watched more Disney Channel, so I was more familiar with, like, my life revolved around Selena Gomez, Miley Cyrus, That's So Raven, don't I think her name is Raven, like those actresses, and mainly Miley Cyrus. I was absolutely obsessed with Hannah Montana. I had a lot of Hannah Montana merch. I had a lot of Hannah Montana outfits. You know, that short crop thing she used to wear. So I was very familiar. I know what this world is. But when I saw this book, I went into it simply because some of the YouTubers I followed, they gave it really good reviews and I was interested. Now, I want to preface this whole review by saying that Jennette in no way hates her mom. This is not a villain story where she writes an entire book bashing everything that her mom does. This is a very interesting narration style because she talks kind of like she goes for and against every single situation that she describes. She portrays her mom as a very complicated, very nuanced individual who had many struggles herself. She grew up in a time in America where things were just a certain way, and she projected a lot of those things and a lot of those insecurities onto Jennette, and Jennette fully understands that. And also, Jennette growing up, her biggest wish in life was just to make sure that her mom was always okay, because her mom growing up was battling cancer. She did kind of, get better at some point, but there was always a risk that she would get worse. So every year on her birthday, she would wish for her mom to just be okay, just be alive for another year. So when she says her mom, I'm glad my mom died, it's also factor to say in that for once in her life, she can actually wish for something else for herself, and her life no longer revolves around her mom. So without really knowing any of the details of the book, I think it's really easy to kind of even question why anyone would write a book like this. But I think Jennette is actually starting a really good movement of anyone who's been in the public eye actually coming up with very, I'd say, very honest books, very just no bullshit kind of books. Because I remember Miley Cyrus wrote a book a couple of years ago, which I refused to read because I think it's firstly ghostwritten and awful. Because I've seen snippets of it and it just doesn't feel like the right thing. Also, she was so young. I would love to read if she comes up with anything now after she had her full, she came up with like who she genuinely is. At this point, if she writes anything, I would be super interested. Same with Selena Gomez, but I think back then it was too early. But I would love to see this type of memoirs written by more child actors, YouTubers, whoever it is. I'm honestly, most memoirs, or even like some of them actually write autobiographies when they're 20. So like they're just so like surface level. They're all about how you can achieve all the successes that they have, and that's not always possible. It's not always helpful. But I feel like anyone, whether or not you know who Jennette McCurdy is, even though you're not a child actor, you might not even be in the public eye. I think the fact that the book is so much centered around her relationship with her mom and her relationship with kind of her family dynamic, I think people will find this a lot more relatable. And I really do hope that a lot more people start writing these types of books, because I can see like a lot of young people who are maybe in the public eye now are getting very quickly viral or insta famous, like that corn guy, the yodeling kid, like suddenly they're pushed into the limelight, and how that impacts them, because I don't genuinely think this is a good thing for someone to be like all over everything one day and the next day you're gone because someone else has replaced you. I know that the child actor thing is not like that, but honestly it is as competitive. So yeah, let's start with the review. You go back a couple of years, you go back to Jennette's childhood, and she talks about how she grew up in household that was quite messy. So she talks about how everyone is like so much of a hoarder. She lived with her parents, her two brothers or three brothers. I don't remember the details very much because it's been I think it's been 2 months since I read it. And then she lives with her grandparents there. And honestly, her favorite time of the week is the time on Sunday when they go to church, because she just feels like that's one time when they're out of this like messy house where she feels like she can breathe. Because when she's in that house, she feels like she doesn't have any space for herself. There is no privacy, there is nothing, and she'd much rather be somewhere else. My doggy is here. Can you see? Tara's here. You can rest. Right, so she talks about that and how with all of this, the only kind of comfort she found in this life was with her mom and the time they spent together. And she felt like her relationship with her mom was so close, and her mom was her world. And that all came crumbling down when she found out that her mom had cancer. And she remember like the first time her mom went through that and, you know, battling cancer and coming out of it, actually feeling quite strong. And her mom was like, oh, I'm gonna do this, I got this, you know. And she thought that she was so strong for doing that. But from then on, her mom's kind of talking about how it's always her dream to be an actress. And then she's like, Jennette, you're gonna be an actress. And at that very point is kind of like the first red flag, because she never really gives Jennette those options of like, what do you want to do? How do you want to do it? In reality, growing up, Jennette never really had the freedom or the choice to ever know even that she had a choice. Like she was unaware that she could choose what she wants for herself, because so much was dictated for her from a very young age. Her mom would very closely pick, you know, what she's wearing and how she's living. Her diaries, her phones, her emails were all monitored by her mom. And her mom even showered her till the age of 16. So you can imagine that like there was no personal space in this relationship at all. But to Jennette, who grew up like that, there didn't seem anything strange about it. So from then on, she starts getting smaller gigs. And then, you know, slowly she starts to build her career. And she talks about how much her mom really focuses her life around Jennette, like helping her grow, the way she builds these connections, the way she drives her to every single audition. She sits there, she makes sure Jennette looks immaculate, dyeing her hair, dyeing her eyebrows, making sure that she's calorie counting, which she introduced to Jennette at a very young age, so that she could look younger for longer and flat-chested, and she didn't look like she was getting too old too quickly, because then she couldn't get those child roles that her mom wanted for her. Although all of these things alone are massive red flags, I feel like where the red flags began was where Jennette started feeling economic strain from a very young age. She felt like she had to continue doing this because of the monetary, you know, like she needed to provide for her family basically. And you can say that, you know, arguably throughout history and throughout different cultures, parents have exerted a huge amount of influence and control over their children, for good or bad. You know, sometimes that works out okay, sometimes not. But this amount of influence and pressure on kids to be a certain way and do a certain thing, like even in India today, our parents hold a lot of control over their children and what they study and how they perform. And they project it as in like, oh, we do so much for you, we pay for this, we pay for that. And they almost make you constantly feel that you owe them for the rest of your life. Whereas it's not a norm in every culture. In some cultures, parents do what they're supposed to do, which is bring up their children and do the best they can for them. And then they just let their children be in, you know, children want to do stuff for them because they don't feel obligated. Whereas I feel like more so in Indian culture, there's more of an obligation that you have to do it. And if there was less obligation, I feel like there would be less pushback from children, and there would be more of a better relationship. I'm not saying every relationship in the Indian culture is bad. I'm just saying from my experience, I've been very lucky to have a family that's been kind of okay with me moving abroad and doing my own thing. But there are many people who think that keeping children at home and keeping them close is what's best for them, not knowing full well that it's a very selfish decision, because you want children to stay close so that they can be close to you and look after you, not because you want them to find their own path in life and flourish and do what they really want to do. I feel like there's this huge disconnect and discourse around this topic, because in one hand, your children, you brought them to life and You know, they do owe you because you take care of them, but not in a way that they owe you your entire life. They will look after you, you should have a good relationship, they will keep you company, they will, you know, they will be there for you when you need them most. But I don't think any parent should ever make their children feel obligated to do a certain thing. In this case, in Jennette's case, she was felt the obligation to make money for her family, do exactly what her mom says, or she wouldn't know what to do. In a way, if you don't even wash your own hair till you're 16, you basically don't even know how to live. Like, I can't imagine. I think I moved out of home when I was like 13. I went to boarding school, and then 18 I fully moved out of home. I haven't really been back. I cannot imagine being independent at such a young age if my mom was literally washing my hair till 16. Like, nobody does that. I don't think parents even wash their kids' hair when they're like 8, 6. I don't know, I'm not a parent, okay? And honestly, I feel like someone like me commenting, or anyone without kids commenting on this, people might say like, oh, what do you know about bringing up children? I don't, and that's the reason I'm choosing not to have kids as of now, because you need to feel ready, you need to be in the right mental space to do that, right? And I still feel like there's so much I need to work through before I get there. I know that people earlier and back in the day didn't have the choice because they were just pushed and forced to have kids as soon as possible after marriage. Even if that's the case, I think I'm not blaming parents for being a certain way. I would much rather that if they are at the stage of their life where they realize that they could have done some things better, they should speak to their kids and tell them, I'm really sorry about this, I should have done this better. I hope you understand that my situation in the time didn't allow me to do any better. I didn't know any better, but like, I fully take responsibility for your trauma. I think that in itself will help so many people, so many adults deal with life just better. But the fact that a lot of parents don't want to take the responsibility for the children's trauma is also a big factor in this discourse. And all of this is in relation to all the very small and very, like, all the way to the bigger conversations that Jennette shares with her family. And I feel like her dad is like kind of not even mentioned, but she should have written a more fleshed out part, like at least a chapter or two for him too, because I think putting all the blame on the mom is also not fair. Maybe about the parents' relationship and the dynamic and how the dad treated her. I think all of that would have helped more. It just felt like her dad was a very detached person from the beginning, and her mom had to deal with a lot in terms of that, and it was just getting to the point where like she was doing the best she could, but she almost treated Jennette like an adult since she was young, but didn't give her the freedom that an adult has, or the choices that an adult has. Later in the book, she goes on to talk about her life with Nickelodeon and how it was to work in iCarly. She talked about her working relationship with different actresses, including Ariana Grande. And she did talk about like how some of them did receive like better preferential treatment than she did, but at the same time, she was more talking about, you know, how it impacted her. And she actually talks really well about like how supportive her co-stars were, like how like great relationships. When I read this, I thought about like sometimes people put so much focus on familial relationships being the core and like the strength of your life, whereas she found strength in people outside of her family, in co-workers and friends who really gave her a bit of courage and a bit of like support that she really needed to believe in herself. And that was really amazing. Even later, she talks about her relationship with a much older man, and in this case she shares a letter, which I know she read it out loud in one of her interviews with Willow Smith. Yes. And I saw the snippet, and that actually is what got me interested in reading the entire book, which she shares the letter, and her mom is like, you're disgusting, you're ashamed, you're not my daughter anymore because you're dating this ugly older dude, and you look fat in the photos that the paparazzi took, and by the way, you know, not mom anymore because you know, you're not my kid anymore, and your brothers don't want anything to do with you either. By the way, send money for a new fridge, ours broke. And that just like, I think that is just the perfect little snippet of what the entire book is about, because you just see this kind of entitlement that the mom has to Jennette's money, to Jennette's existence. At some point, Jennette finally moves out in her own apartment and she's living alone, and slowly by slowly her mom just moves in, and the way she describes this takeover is just so perfection. Like, I don't know if I had to ever write like something like that, how I would go about it. I think it really proves that she did put so much time and effort into the way she like strung the story together, because this was a very tricky part. I think the fact that when her mom moved in with her, that was, I think, the trickiest part to write. To me as a reader, I could see how difficult that could be to almost explain without making any one part too significant, how it was like small things that added up over time. It was very like well done. There was also talks about other romantic relationships, first kisses on set, and all of those things, and also like being offered hush money by Nickelodeon for not disclosing certain things. And she also talks about someone called the creator, who we all know who that is, and how she was treated by the creator. And she's quite smart in not disclosing too many names, because I think like at the end of the day people know what you're talking about, but it's more the context. And although the book was centered around her mom, she talks about these things because it really helps you piece together how much being so dependent on her mom and having no backbone, no voice for such a long time really impacted her adult relationships. It was not just about childhood trauma. Childhood trauma can really impact people throughout the course of their life. It was only much later in life, when she finally stopped working as a child actor, that she could take a step back, look at her life, and really ask herself, like, what do I, Jennette, want from this life? What do I want to do? What do I enjoy? And it's just really heartbreaking, because I think us as kids were probably watching that show and thinking, oh my god, I want to be her, I wish I was her, you know, everything in her life is so perfect. And then you get to read something like this and you suddenly become more critical about how you perceive people who you see on screen and the kind of life they portray. Especially like today, seeing on social media how perfect people's lives look, I think we should always have, like, I know because I share a lot of my life on social media, I personally know how much I'm hiding in the background and how much shit I have to deal with on a regular basis. That's why when I look at other people, I never really get that affected. When I look at happy stuff, I'm genuinely like, that looks great, I'm glad you're enjoying, because I know behind the scenes everyone is dealing with stuff. But I think when you're young, you don't have that perspective. You just think what you see is what it is. And for that matter, it is more important for parents to even tell their kids when they're younger that, I know that you're like watching this and you really idolize her, but like, you know, this is her job, and you know, this is very serious. And child actors, I think, have one of the toughest jobs in the world, because you still have to study, you still have to make sure, you know, you have an education and somewhat of a normal life and relationships and friendships, at the same time juggling this like superstar personality that's out there of you. So it's a really difficult place to be in, and I think she did a really good job of shedding light on all of those aspects in this like very short book. So I hope that convinced you to give it a read. Great as an audiobook because she narrates it herself, and I think if you get to read the physical book, it might be more punchy, even more punchy. But yeah, that's all for today. I don't have a book to show you because I didn't read it as an audiobook, or she narrated it to me, which I personally enjoyed more because it felt more personal. If you have any memoir recommendations or autobiographies, let me know. I love ones that are, you know, about certain topics like these, about certain phases of people's lives, not so much motivational stuff. But yeah, I'll see you next time, and take care.